I bought the fat saloon girl to die for me." Jacob Ghost Mercer said it so calmly that half the men in the Red Valley Saloon thought they'd misheard him. February wind howled against the warped windows of Deadwood, Dakota Territory, but inside the air was thick with smoke, spilled whiskey, and the bitter stench of men who'd given up on anything but luck and liquor. At the far end of the bar, Beatrice B. Sullivan balanced a tray against her wide hip, pretending she didn't hear. At 26 and more than 250 pounds, she was the punchline of the Red Valley. A woman kept on because she could sing a room to silence, not because any man here wanted to be seen wanting her. "Fat B, another round," someone yelled. "Hustle, girl, you got enough meat on you to feed the camp." Laughter snapped through the room like a whip. Bee's cheeks burned, but her back stayed straight. She'd learned the rule: show hurt, and they only cut deeper. In the corner, under a yellowed painting and a rack of antlers, sat Chester Polk, the saloon's rat-faced owner, his greasy fingers drumming the table. Across from him, looming like a grizzled monument, sat Jacob Mercer. Ghost, some called him. A mountain man with hair gone prematurely silver, a beard to match, and 3 ragged claw scars dragging down the left side of his face. Men who bragged about not fearing God still lowered their eyes when he passed. "I didn't stutter, Polk," Jacob said, voice rough as gravel. "I need a wife for 6 months, someone nobody will miss when I'm gone." Chester snorted. "You marryin' or buryin', Ghost?" "Doctor says my heart's failing," Jacob answered. "Could stop tomorrow, could last till summer. I've got a claim in the Medicine Bow worth more than this whole street if it's legally held through spring. Territorial law says only a widow can inherit without a fight. I need someone to live on that mountain with me, sign the papers, bury me, then sell the claim and live well." "So you're shopping for a woman to inherit your grave," Chester said, grinning. His piggy eyes swept the room, hunting for cruelty. "Needs to be someone no one here gives a damn about." His gaze landed on B. "What about Fat B?" he said, loud enough for the whole saloon to hear. "Sings pretty, eats like a draft horse, useless for anything else. I'll pay you to take her. She's more trouble than she's worth." Men howled with laughter. Someone slapped Bee's backside as she passed. Another mooed like a cow. Bee set her tray down carefully, fingers trembling. She told herself not to look. Not at Chester. Not at the mountain man. "Can she hear us?" one miner jeered. "Or is there too much lard in her ears?" "She can hear just fine," Jacob said. His eyes had shifted, fixing on Bee with a gaze that felt like a weight on her skin. Not hungry, not mocking, weighing, measuring. "Hey, Bee," Chester called. "You want to go die on a mountain with Ghost Mercer? He needs a fat wife to keep the wolves fed after he keels over." The room roared. Slowly, Bee turned. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. She met Jacob's pale gray eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a man's face in years. Not desire, not disgust. Honesty. "Can you cook?" Jacob asked her, cutting straight through the laughter. Bee swallowed. "Yes." "Can you work?" "All my life." "Can you stand 6 months of snow, silence, and a dying man for company?" Bee looked around the saloon, the sticky floors, the leering faces, the cage of debt Chester kept her in. Then she looked back at Jacob Mercer. "Can it be worse than this?" she asked quietly. He held her gaze. No. Somewhere deep inside, something in her answered. If you're listening to this right now, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you hearing Bee's story from? which city, which country, because in a smoky saloon in Deadwood, one fat saloon girl was about to make a choice that would change her life and a mountain man's. For a moment, nobody breathed. The Red Valley Saloon hung in a strange silence, the kind that comes when a joke stops being funny and starts being dangerous. Bee wasn't used to people looking at her and waiting for her answer. Usually, they laughed over her head, ordered another drink, shouted for another song. Now the whole room watched her like she was a card about to be turned on the table. "Well?" Chester Polk demanded, grinning wide enough to show his yellow teeth. "Ghost Mercer's made you an offer, Bee. You gonna go die for him on some mountain, or you prefer to die slow here on your feet and in debt?" The crowd chuckled, relieved to be back on familiar ground. Bee as the punchline. Bee's hands curled into fists at her sides. 3 years of scrubbing floors, carrying trays, and swallowing insults pressed hot under her skin. 3 years of being told she was too big, too loud, too much. 3 years of Chester's ledger showing numbers she could never quite pay off, no matter how many double shifts she worked. She turned to Jacob Mercer, forcing herself to meet his eyes again. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "About your heart?" Jacob nodded once. "Doctor in Cheyenne says I'm a walking fuse. Could go off any day. He thinks the bear damaged more than my ribs when it hit me. Says the strain of high country living will finish what it started." "And your claim?" Bee asked. "It's really worth that much?" "More," Jacob said simply, "but I won't live to enjoy it. The law says if my legal wife is living on the property when I die, she inherits. You'd have a fight on your hands with companies trying to underpay you, but the deed, the ledgers, the samples, they're all in order. You'd be rich if you're stubborn enough." Bee almost laughed at that. Stubborn enough. It was the one thing no one had ever tried to beat out of her. Chester snorted. "Bee doesn't need to know all that. She needs to know she gets out of here tonight if she says yes. That's the best offer she's ever had." "She needs to know everything," Jacob said mildly, without taking his eyes off Bee. "It's her life." The room shifted uneasily. Men who treated women like furniture weren't sure what to do with a man who spoke like that about one. Bee's heart thumped hard. "What happens on the mountain?" she asked. "Exactly." Jacob's voice stayed level, matter of fact. "We ride to my cabin near the claim. You help me through winter, cooking, hauling wood, tending animals, keeping records of ore. You learn everything you need to run the place alone if my heart gives out. I'll prepare the papers so when I die, you can prove to the claims office that you're my widow and rightful heir." "And between now and then?" Bee forced herself to ask the question that mattered in a different way. "What kind of husband do you intend to be?" Chester cackled. "He won't want you in his bed, Bee. Man's dying, not blind." The laughter shot through her again. Old shame flared. She braced for Jacob to look away, embarrassed by the very idea. He didn't. "I won't touch you unless you want to be touched," Jacob said, and the entire saloon went still. "I'm not buying your body. I'm buying your brains, your hands, your willingness to work, and your ability to keep going when a lesser soul would quit." Bee blinked. Nobody had ever said it like that, not out loud. "All I ask," Jacob continued, "is that you're honest with me. Don't promise more than you mean. Don't pledge affection you don't feel. I don't need a pretty fiction for my last season. I need someone I can depend on." "Depend on?" Chester snorted. "She breaks chairs when she sits too hard." A few men chuckled, but it sounded thin this time. Chester was starting to sound smaller just by standing next to Jacob Mercer. Bea looked around the saloon one last time. The stained boards, the men who had grabbed her without asking, the women who had come and gone, most burned out or beaten down, the debts that always grew, never shrank, the songs she sang to drown herself out. She looked at Chester, smirking, already dreaming of what he'd do with the $200 Jacob had mentioned. "Do I walk out of here clear of you?" she asked him. "No debts, no tricks, no paper I don't know about." Chester spread his hands. "If Ghost puts 200 in my palm, you're free as a bird. I don't keep what I don't own." "You don't own me now," Bea said softly. Chester's smile flickered. Jacob pushed a leather pouch across the table. The heavy clink of coins silenced the room. "Count it," he said. Chester did, hands suddenly unsteady. 200, he confirmed. "Well now, Fat Bea, looks like you're worth something after all." Bea ignored him. She turned toward Jacob. "You won't lie to me?" she asked. "Not about your heart, not about the claim, not about what you expect." "I won't lie to you," he said, "about anything." She drew a slow breath. "Then I'll be your wife." The words left her mouth like a dive off a cliff. Laughter erupted again, but now it sounded desperate, like men laughing at a funeral because the silence is too much. Chester clapped his hands. "Judge," he bellowed, "wake up, you old snake. We've got a wedding to perform." The circuit judge, half drunk from his poker game, staggered over with his law book. Jacob stood. Bea stepped down from behind the bar, each step feeling like it belonged to someone else. The judge mumbled through the vows, his words running together. "Do you, Jacob Mercer, take this woman?" "I do," Jacob said calmly. "Do you, Beatrice Sullivan, take this man?" Bea felt every eye on her. She thought of the mountain, the risk, the dying man in front of her. She thought of staying here, of aging under Chester's thumb and the town's ridicule until her voice gave out and there was nothing left of her but debt and bitterness. "I do," she said. The judge signed the certificate. Chester stamped an X on the ledger, canceling her debt with a reluctant flourish. Someone cheered. Someone else called out, "Kiss the bride." But Jacob didn't reach for her. He only offered his arm. "Mrs. Mercer," he said quietly, "let's get you out of here." As they walked toward the door, the laughter started up again behind them. "Ghost bought Fat Bea to die for him," a miner howled. "She'll outlive him by 50 years. "Maybe she'll eat him first," another cackled. Bea's steps faltered. The old shame rose, hot and familiar. Jacob's hand settled on the small of her back, firm, steady. "Listen," he said, low enough that only she heard. "That's the last time you have to hear any of them. Let them talk. They don't own your future anymore." Bea straightened. She stepped over the threshold onto the icy street. The winter wind hit her full in the face. Behind her, the Red Valley Saloon roared with ugly laughter. Ahead of her, the night was dark, the road uncertain, the man beside her half ghost already. But for the first time in years, the next step was hers. The trail leading out of Deadwood climbed fast, steep enough that the mule beneath Bea snorted clouds of steam into the frozen air. Her legs already ached from gripping the saddle, and the February cold stabbed through the thin saloon dress hidden under her cloak. But she kept her back straight, determined not to show weakness. Jacob rode ahead on his massive gray horse, the animal's breath rising like a ghost in the dark. He never looked back to check on her, Not out of indifference, Bee realized, but because he assumed she would speak up if she needed something. The idea that she might simply endure had not occurred to him. After nearly an hour of silence, Jacob slowed his horse until he rode beside her. "You cold?" he asked. "Yes," Bee admitted, "but I'll manage." Jacob studied her a moment, then reined to a stop. "Dismount." Bee slid off the mule, trying not to stumble. Jacob opened one of his packs and pulled out something thick and fur-lined. "It's a buffalo coat," he said. "Heavy, but it'll keep you warm." "I have a cloak," she said automatically. "That cloak was meant for walking between saloon and boarding house," he replied. "Up here, it won't keep the cold from killing you." Bee hesitated. The coat looked enormous, even on her. "I don't want to slow us down." Jacob shook his head. "You'll slow us down more if frostbite sets in." She took the coat. The weight surprised her, warm, dense, protective. Jacob helped her slip it on, but his hands never lingered or touched more than necessary. Bee had spent years learning to read men's intentions. Jacob's movements were clean, efficient, respectful, purely practical, exactly as he said their marriage would be. "Better?" he asked. The warmth hit her like a shock. "Much." He nodded once, mounted up again, and they continued. Hours passed. The stars wheeled overhead. The silence of the wilderness pressed in, vast and humbling. For the first time in years, Bee felt the world around her expand instead of tighten. At their first camp, Jacob set to work immediately, unsaddling animals, lighting a fire, melting snow in an iron pot. Bee hovered awkwardly, unused to being part of anything except orders shouted over noise. "Tell me what to do," she said finally. Jacob glanced over. "You know how to cook?" "Yes." "Then we'll take turns. Tonight I'll handle the fire. You can prepare the meat." Bee knelt beside the pack he'd pointed to, expecting salted pork or jerky. Instead, she found wrapped cuts of fresh venison. "You hunted this recently?" she asked. "Yesterday," Jacob said. "Didn't know I'd be feeding two, but it'll stretch." He said it without resentment, without the bitterness she'd expected. Bee cut the meat, added dried onions from another pouch, and stirred as the snow melted into broth. Jacob watched the flames with a distant look, as if he were measuring the night for threats she couldn't see. "Does anything frighten you?" Bee asked before she could stop herself. Jacob didn't look up. "A few things." "Bear attacks?" she suggested gently. "No, I've survived one of those." "Claim jumpers?" "No, they bleed like everyone else." "Then what?" He finally looked at her, and for a moment she saw something raw behind his eyes. "Failing the people who depend on me?" Bee blinked. She hadn't expected that answer. She added another pinch of salt to the pot to cover her reaction. When the food was ready, Jacob took only a small portion and passed the bowl to her first. "You eat," he said. "You need it more than I do." Bee stiffened, expecting mockery. But his expression was neutral, practical. He meant she needed strength for the trail, nothing more. "I'm fine sharing evenly," she said. "You're not," he replied. "The mountain's harder on new riders than on old scouts." "Eat." She did. The hot broth sent warmth surging through her body. Jacob ate quietly beside her, the firelight catching the scars carved down the side of his face. "Does it hurt?" she asked before catching herself. "It aches when it's cold," he said. "Otherwise, no." "How did you survive it?" Jacob stared into the fire. "Margaret distracted the bear long enough for me to grab the rifle." Bee's breath caught. "Your wife saved you." "Yes," Jacob said softly, "and I couldn't save her." The fire cracked, snow hissed where sparks landed, and then Jacob rose abruptly. "You take the tent," he said, handing her the bedroll. "I'll sleep outside." "What? No, it's freezing." "I've slept colder," he replied, "and it's safer if I'm awake to listen." "Listen for what?" "Wolves, cats, men." Bee swallowed. "Then at least let me keep watch for a while." Jacob gave her a long look. "You don't know what to listen for. Then teach me." A small shift happened in his face, something like approval. "Tomorrow," he said, "when we're on the trail." Bee crawled into the tent, still warm from the buffalo coat. She lay awake for a long time, listening to Jacob move outside, quiet, steady, capable, a man who kept his promises and didn't waste words, a man who didn't flinch from danger, grief, or loneliness, and a man who, despite all that, had asked her, not any of the girls prettier, smaller, or more socially acceptable, to be his wife, not for romance, not for beauty, for dependability, for strength, for something he saw in her that she had never been allowed to see in herself. Bee fell asleep to the steady sound of Jacob's boots pacing around the camp, and for the first time in her life she felt not safe, not yet, but the possibility of safety. Dawn found the peaks glowing pale pink as Bee followed Jacob through the final stretch of their journey. The forest thinned, revealing a wide clearing carved directly into the mountainside. Smoke curled gently from the chimney of a sturdy log cabin. A small stable and smokehouse sat to one side. To the other, the dark mouth of a mine tunnel supported by thick beams disappeared into the earth. It was not the shack she'd expected a dying man to keep. It was a home, a real one, built with purpose and pride. Jacob dismounted. "Welcome to the claim." Bee slid off her mule, legs trembling from days of travel, but she stood straight, refusing to show exhaustion. Jacob led her to the cabin door and pushed it open. Warm air met her face, scented with pine, smoke, and something faintly herbal. Inside, the space was surprisingly large. A sturdy table with 2 chairs, a stone hearth glowing with embers, shelves lined with jars and tools, a ladder leading to a sleeping loft, and a wide window that caught the morning light. "You'll take the loft," Jacob said, setting down packs. "More space, warmer. I'll sleep down here." "Jacob, this is your home," Bee protested. "I can sleep near the fire." "Loft is safer," he said simply. "If an animal tries to break in, it'll come through the door. I'm the one who should be closest." The statement was matter-of-fact, not dramatic. He wasn't showing off or trying to impress her. This was just who he was, a man who placed himself between danger and those under his care without thinking. Bee's throat tightened. Jacob handed her a set of folded garments. "These should fit. Margaret made them for herself, but I've stitched some larger seams." Bee froze. "Are you sure? I don't want to take her things." Jacob's face softened, just barely, like frost easing in morning light. "She want them to be used, and they're better suited for mountain work than anything from deadwood." Bee accepted the clothing quietly. As she changed behind a curtain he'd rigged for her privacy, she breathed in the scent of the fabric, smoke, cedar, the faintest trace of another woman's life. She felt no jealousy, only gratitude. When she emerged, Jacob glanced up from sharpening a hatchet. His eyes flicked over the clothes, noting the fit, not lingering on her body, not appraising, just checking she was warm enough. "Good," he said. You look ready? Ready for what? Bee wondered. Ready to work? Ready to survive? Ready to live beside a man who had no intention of living long? Jacob moved to the stove. Sit, I'll make breakfast. You don't have to cook for me. I do until you learn the stove, he replied. Cabin stoves burn hot. Easy to scorch food or your hand if you're not used to 'em. Bee laughed softly. Is everything in your life practical? Jacob didn't smile, but something near his eyes warmed. Pretty much. While he cooked, he pointed things out. The drying herbs above the hearth, the barrels of winter stores, the careful arrangement of tools. Everything had its place. Everything was meant to last through bitter seasons and solitude. Do you live entirely alone? Bee asked. Mostly. Had a partner the first year, but he left. Said the mountain wasn't worth the work. Jacob slid eggs and venison onto a plate. Some men want gold without sweat. Some want company without responsibility. Which one were you? Neither, Jacob said, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled just a little. I only wanted a life with Margaret. When she died, the mountain was what I had left. Bee understood. The cabin wasn't a relic of his grief. It was his grief, shaped into wood and stone. As they ate, Jacob observed her quietly, noticing the small details. How she took tiny bites at first from old habit, how she hesitated before finishing her portion as if expecting someone to shame her for taking too much. Bee, he said gently, eat until you're full. I measure food stores carefully. We have enough. You won't be punished for eating here. Her fork stilled. Punished. He'd seen it. Seen the bruises others had ignored, the humiliation she'd swallowed to survive. And instead of pitying her, he offered something stranger and more precious. Normalcy. Respect. After breakfast, Jacob began showing her the rhythms of the mountain. They hauled water from the half-frozen stream. He taught her how to split kindling with a small axe, bracing her hands with his for a moment. The touch was brief, firm, and utterly gentle. You're stronger than you think, he said. No mockery, no sarcasm, just truth. By midday, she'd learned how to muck the stable, how to care for the mule, how to bank the fire for the coldest hours of the night. You pick things up fast, Jacob said as they returned to the cabin. Bee flushed with pride, a warm, startling feeling after years of being told she was slow, clumsy, worthless. I try. You do more than try, Jacob corrected. Trying is thinking about doing. You're doing. They shared lunch, simple stew and dried apples. Then, for the first time since arriving, Bee felt comfortable enough to sing softly while she kneaded dough. Jacob froze mid-motion. Go on, he murmured. She did. A slow, haunting melody her mother used to hum during hard winters. Jacob listened with his eyes closed, the knife forgotten in his hand. I haven't heard a voice like that since. He didn't finish the sentence. You make this cabin feel alive again. Bee swallowed hard. Thank you. After supper, the winds rose, rattling the shutters. Jacob sealed the door with the heavy iron latch and moved to his bedroll near the fire. Good night, Bee. Good night, Jacob. She climbed to the loft and lay down, but sleep didn't come. Down below she could hear him shifting, coughing softly, sometimes pressing his fist to his chest. Each sound reminded her he was dying, and she was learning to care for him more each day, not because he bought her, not because circumstances forced her, but because he was the first man she'd ever met who treated her like someone worth holding on to. Bee stared at the ceiling beams, the fire flickering below, and felt a delicate, dangerous hope take root in her chest. She didn't want him to die. Not any more. Spring in the Medicine Bow Range was a strange, shifting thing. Days of melting snow and bright sun followed by nights of sudden frost. The mountain tested everyone who tried to live on it, even those born to hardship. But for Bee, those early spring weeks were the first time in years she woke each morning with purpose instead of dread. She learned quickly. Jacob taught her to use the rifle, slowly, carefully, never pushing her past the point of fear. He guided her arms as she aimed, his hand steadying her elbows, his breath warm near her ear. "Don't lock your shoulders," he murmured one afternoon. "Relax them. Let the gun breathe." Her pulse leapt at the closeness, but Jacob wasn't flirting. He was instructing, calm as always. She wanted more of his voice near her skin, more of his presence. But she swallowed the feeling and focused on the target. She hit the center of the stump. Jacob smiled, small, surprised, and real. "Good, very good." "Luck," she said, breathless. "No, skill, and I don't hand out compliments lightly." The praise warmed her more than the sun, but even as the mountain opened to spring, something darker tightened inside the cabin. At first, Bea only noticed small things. The way Jacob paused halfway up the hill, leaning against a tree and pressing a hand to his chest, the way his breath grew shallow after chopping wood, the way he sometimes woke, gasping at night. He tried to hide it. He tried to stand taller, breathe steadier, work faster. But Bea saw everything. The truth was simple and devastating. He was failing. One evening, as the wind rattled the shutters and a cold mist rolled in from the ridge, Bea finally gathered her courage. "Jacob," she said quietly as she ladled stew into bowls, "what exactly did the doctor say about your heart?" Jacob didn't look up. He traced a line along the wooden table, a scar from years of use, then finally met her eyes. "That it's dying," he said. Her hand tightened on the ladle. "But how soon?" Jacob inhaled. "He said 6 months if I rested, less if I didn't." "And you're not resting." "I can't rest." His jaw clenched. "The mine needs to be tended. The claim has to be proven. The cabin needs maintenance. Winter stores need replacing. If I stop working, everything Margaret and I built becomes worthless." Bea sat down slowly. Her voice was a whisper. "Jacob, you don't have to do it alone." "I won't make you shoulder this," he said firmly. "It's not your burden." "Maybe not. But I'm your wife now, no matter the reason we married. What burdens you burdens me." Jacob froze, not in anger, not in resistance, but in something that looked like fear. "Bea," he said, voice rough, "you weren't meant to care." Her heart cracked. "I wasn't meant to anything, but I care. I can't help it." Jacob looked away. Silence fell, not cold, not hostile, but heavy with the truth neither of them had intended to invite into this arrangement. That night, Bea lay awake in the loft, listening to Jacob's breathing, uneven, strained, faltering. She imagined him slipping away in the dark, alone on the floor beneath her, his heart giving out without a sound. The thought hollowed her. She realized then, with terrifying clarity, she did not want freedom bought with his death. She wanted him alive. She wanted him whole. She wanted a future that was never part of any deal. The next day began like any other, chores, mining records, tending the animals, but tension ran beneath every moment. Jacob worked too hard. Bea worried too much. Near midday, while hauling water, Jacob suddenly braced himself against the cabin wall, face gray with pain. Bee dropped her bucket and ran to him. "Sit, now." He shook his head. "I'm fine." "You're not." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Jacob Mercer, you sit down now, or I'll drag you." His eyes widened, not in anger, but in surprise. He sank onto a stump, breath ragged. Bee knelt before him. "Tell me what hurts." "Everything," he admitted. "Some days it feels like a fist inside my chest. Some days it feels like drowning." She touched his hand, gently, as if afraid he might break. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" "Because I didn't want pity." "I'm not pitying you." He finally looked at her fully, really looked at her. The weathered lines around his eyes softened. "No," he said quietly, "you're not." The moment stretched, intimate and fragile. Then Jacob pulled back slightly, shoulders stiffening. "Bee, we made a bargain. You were supposed to inherit the claim and start a new life. You weren't supposed to feel anything for me." Bee swallowed. "Do you?" His breath hitched, not from pain, but from truth pushing against the walls he'd built. "I can't," he rasped. "Not again." "Jacob." He stood abruptly, swaying but determined. "Go inside. I need to check the traps near the ridge." "You can barely stand." "Then I'll crawl," he said, not unkindly, but with finality. He took his rifle and disappeared into the tree line. Bee stood freezing in the yard long after he'd gone, her heart pounding with fear, frustration, longing. She had seen death before, its slow approach, its inevitability. She'd seen people give up before it reached them. Jacob wasn't giving up. He was running from the one thing that terrified him more than dying, caring, loving, losing again. By the time he returned at dusk, exhausted, soaked from melted snow, breathing hard, Bee had made a decision. She met him at the door. "Jacob," she said softly, "I know you think you're protecting me." "I am," he insisted. "No, you're protecting yourself, and you're killing yourself faster for it." Jacob's entire frame went still. The storm inside him flickered across his scarred face. "What do you want from me, Bee?" he whispered. Her answer came without hesitation. "The truth, and the chance to fight for you. With you, not after you." Jacob closed his eyes. When he opened them again, a war raged behind them, pain, fear, need, and something deeper, buried but not gone. "You deserve more than a dying man," he said. "Yes," Bee replied honestly, "but I don't want more. I want you." He staggered, her words striking harder than any blow. For the first time since she'd arrived, Jacob Mercer seemed unsure, vulnerable, shaken. Bee took a slow breath. "Jacob, let me in. Let me help. Let me care." He didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. And that, Bee realized, was the first crack in the wall he'd spent 5 years building around his broken heart. The first warning came at dawn 2 days later, not from Jacob's failing heart, not from the wind's cry through the pines, but from the horses. Bee jolted awake to the sound of frantic whinnying. The cabin still held the blue-gray hush of early morning. Below, she heard Jacob rise from his bedroll with a grunt, boots thudding softly against the floorboards. Then came the sound that froze her blood. Male voices, more than one, low, confident. Men who weren't afraid of being heard. Bee scrambled down the ladder. Jacob was already at the window, his rifle in hand, expression carved from stone. "Claim jumpers?" she whispered. Jacob didn't blink. "Yet." "How many?" "4, maybe 5. His voice was calm, too calm. The calm of a man who knew danger better than life. Bee felt the floor pitch beneath her. "Jacob, you can't fight them alone." He didn't look at her. Go to the loft. Stay low. If they fire through the windows, no." Bee stepped forward. "I won't hide while you face them." "You will," Jacob said quietly. "I won't have you in the crossfire." Her pulse hammered. "And what happens if your heart gives out mid-shot? What then?" For a moment, something flickered across Jacob's face. Fear, not of the men outside, but of the truth between them. He opened his mouth, then closed it again as a fist pounded the cabin door hard enough to shake the hinges. "Mercer!" a harsh voice shouted. "We know you're in there." Jacob stiffened. "Pike Carson." Bee's stomach dropped. Pike Carson, the deserter, the rustler, the man known for leaving entire families to freeze after stealing their supplies. If there was anyone willing to murder for a silver vein, it was him. Jacob raised his voice. "You're trespassing, Carson. You know the law." Carson laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Law? Nobody's coming up here to enforce anything. You're dying, Mercer. Everyone in Deadwood knows it. That means this claim's as good as ours." Another voice joined in, higher, meaner. "Heard you took a fat saloon girl for a wife. Must be lonely to settle for that." Laughter. Bee felt Jacob go still beside her, the rifle tightening in his hands. She touched his arm. "Don't let them make you reckless." His jaw flexed. "I'm not reckless. I'm angry. That's different." Pike's voice rose again. "Come out and sign the claim over. We'll let you and your livestock walk away." Bee's cheeks burned. Shame, old, familiar, threatened to rise. But Jacob beat it back before it could take root. He stepped in front of her, shoulders squared, voice low but ringing with absolute finality. "You speak about my wife again," he growled, "and the mountain won't bother burying you. I'll do it myself." The silence that followed was thick, startled. Even Pike hadn't expected that. Bee's breath caught. Jacob hadn't said it for show. He hadn't said it out of obligation. He'd said it like he meant it, like her dignity mattered more than his next heartbeat. Pike snarled. "So that's how it is. Fine. Boys, get ready. We'll smoke them out." Bee's eyes widened. "Smoke? They'll try to burn us out," Jacob said grimly. "Stay behind me." "No." Bee grabbed her rifle. "I'll fight with you." Jacob turned to her, shock and something deeper flashing in his eyes. "Bee, you asked me to learn," she whispered. "Let me use what you taught me." Outside, boots crunched through snow. Men took positions behind rocks and tree trunks. Jacob slowly lifted her hand, the one gripping the rifle, steadying it in his own. "You stay behind the stove," he said. "Stone and iron will catch stray bullets. You shoot only if you see a target. Promise me." Bee nodded, heart in her throat. Jacob's voice softened, raw at the edges. "If anything happens to me, nothing will. If it does, run. Don't be a hero." She stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "I'm not running from you. Not again. Not ever." A breath caught in his chest, part pain, part emotion, part something he'd been holding back for months. Then the first shot cracked. Jacob moved in a blur, calm, precise, deadly. He fired once, twice, each shot forcing the attackers to scatter. Bee crouched behind the stove, counting shadows, breath shaking but steadying with each exhale. When a man darted from behind a pine, she saw him clearly, his stance, his aim, his malice. She fired. He fell. Not dead. His scream proved that, but wounded enough to retreat. Jacob glanced back at her, astonished, impressed despite everything. "You're full of surprises," he murmured. "So are you," she whispered back. Then Pike shouted in fury, "Fine! If bullets won't do it, we'll starve you out. The mountain's thawing. They'll have to come out eventually." Snow began to fall, soft flakes drifting around the cabin like a false peace. Bee tightened her grip on her rifle. Jacob leaned against the doorframe, breath uneven, hand pressed to his chest. The siege had begun, and it was only the beginning. Snow fell through the afternoon like ash from a quiet sky, softening the world outside the cabin even as tension tightened every breath inside it. Pike Carson and his men retreated just far enough to be out of range, setting up camp beyond the tree line, close enough to watch, close enough to wait. Jacob bolted the door, then slumped against it for a moment, breathing too hard. Bee rushed to his side. "Sit," she said. "Please." He did, sinking into the chair by the fire as if gravity finally claimed him. His face was pale, sheen of sweat across his brow. Bee knelt beside him, hands trembling despite the warmth of the flames. "You need to lie down," she whispered. "No." Jacob forced his gaze toward the window where shadows moved outside. "If I lie down, I won't get up again." "Jacob." His hand found hers, rough, warm, trembling. "Bee, look at me." She did. What she saw broke her. He was a giant of a man, mountain-forged and stubborn as iron, yet in that moment every inch of him was made of fear, not of the men outside, but of leaving her alone. "I told you not to care for me," he said softly. "I told you not to get attached." "And I ignored you," she whispered. "I'm not sorry." His thumb brushed her knuckles. If I'd known how you'd change this place, how you'd change me, I wouldn't have asked you to come. I wouldn't have made you my wife for the sake of a claim." Bee swallowed hard. "But you did." "Yes," he breathed, "and every day since I've been grateful, more than I can ever say." Outside, a wolf howled, a long, haunting note that slid between the cabin's logs. The fire crackled. The world felt impossibly small, just the two of them and the dark. "Jacob," Bee said quietly, "I choose this. I choose you. Claim or no claim. Danger or no danger. I'm not going anywhere." He closed his eyes as if her words pained him and healed him at once. When he opened them again, something inside him had given way, like snow melting under first spring sun. "Then hear me now," he whispered. "If I make it through this winter, through these men outside, if I live long enough to see summer." Bee leaned closer, breath held. "I'll stop waiting to die. I'll let you fight for me. I'll fight with you. I'll stay in this world for you." The fire popped softly, throwing warm light across his scarred face. Bee's eyes filled with tears. She rested her forehead against his. "Then live, Jacob. Live with me. Live for me." He exhaled shakily, cupping the back of her head. "I want to." For a long moment, they stayed like that, two battered souls holding each other while danger camped just beyond the tree line. Pike Carson would return at dawn. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm waiting in the snow. But for one night, a fat saloon girl and a dying mountain man sat together in the firelight, choosing each other against the world. And as the flames flickered, Bee whispered the question neither of them dared say aloud. "Is love enough to stand against everything coming for us?" If you've stayed with Bee and Jacob until this very moment, thank you. Their story wasn't born from beauty or ease. It rose from the ugliest corners of the frontier, from pain, from loss, from the belief that some lives aren't worth loving. But you proved something by listening all the way through, that every heart, no matter how bruised, deserves to be seen. Before you go, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Your words reach farther than you know. And if you still believe love can grow in the harshest places, then stay close. The next story is already waiting for you.